Well, I'm on the way here to Bismarck. I've been taking a class, and for 4 weekends I had to drive up to Bismarck every weekend, and decided to take alternate routes up there. I'm actually going up there again, so I've got lots of driving to Bismarck footage, so I'm going to experiment this time and cut out some of the boring bits. And mostly because by the time I'm done with this class and another one I'm taking in Bismarck, plus a meeting I went to in Bismarck, which I talked about earlier, I'm going to have so much footage I won't know what to do with it. So, yeah. So I'm just going to chop out sections. This was originally 54 minutes. I've chopped it down to 32, but I'm going to add some back in because on a previous trip, which was useless because I was going the wrong direction and into the sun, I did some tours of little towns, and I go for stuff like that, so I thought that would be fun to share. So I'm going to throw that in here. But for most of this video, I actually have a pretty heavy topic. And it comes off of last week I realized I had the exact same pens for pens in use that I'd had the week before. And I thought, how boring. And mostly it's because I have so many inked up right now. So what I did instead is I uploaded my thoughts on the Governor's Summit on Innovative Education. And that turned out to be a very long video, so I guess it's just as well I didn't do a pens in use. But, by the way, I'm heading west on Highway 12 here. Or east, sorry, east. West will take you to Montana, which is the exact opposite of where I want to go. Now, when I talked about that, I looked at mostly the education side, and I guess some of the excitement that, hey, there's big changes coming in education, and it's becoming necessary, and we can't hide anymore. All true. But I had a comment from Margaret Christie, and you can read it there on the video, that pointed out that there is another side to it besides the education side, and it's a very scary dystopian side. So I pinned her comment as a favorite because that was such a insightful comment. And just like, yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed. Now, maybe my profession is more looking at the future and looking at kids and so on. But the other side of it is the adults, or the people who just aren't ready for this new future. And what do we do for them? You know, one of the comments that disturbed her was from that Apple executive who flat out said, well, people who need managing are unemployable. And I think she was right. So, I'm going to, I don't know if I'm going to address her concerns, because I actually have a lot of concerns too. But maybe I can share some of it, and maybe one of you is the person who can address those concerns. Because I don't have answers. So, she talked about we may be heading into a very dystopian future. And that's true. I'll just briefly define a dystopia. You always hear about utopia as kind of the ultimate world, and everything is dandy and everything worked out just great. A dystopia is where everything worked out very badly. See, I did a cut there. It was all country like this, so not that interesting. You can just barely up ahead see Scranton, North Dakota, which I've toured in a previous video, so I won't in this one. But anyway, a dystopia is kind of your worst possible future. Think of movies like Mad Max. That's a dystopian future. Or a book like 1984, or a book like Brave New World, or Cormac McCarthy? Anyway, The Road. That's dystopia. And there is the possibility of the U.S. becoming a dystopia, and I'll tell you why. And I'm looking at my outline already, I see I did this out of order. When I mentioned in the video previously that a lot of professions are going to disappear. That's actually a little scary. There was a study came out a couple of years ago about the top job in every state. In a lot of states, it was truck driver. Now, we are currently experimenting with self-piloting automobiles. And I'll be honest, on this trip, I would have loved a self-piloting automobile. Because what I was doing at this point is something I hate doing. I hate driving. I enjoy traveling, but I don't like driving. It is such a mindless activity, and I get so bored driving. And I've tried different things for a while. I tried talk radio, God help me. It was all right-wing stuff in this state. I've tried books on tape. I've tried podcasts. And there just isn't much that really compensates for the monotony. And yeah, it can be fun a little bit to drive in a pretty place. Like Needles Highway was a lot of fun. Scenic places. But you can't really enjoy the scenery when you're driving. So yeah, I would be happy if I could just sit back in my seat, watch the scenery, or if there's no scenery, like here, just read a book. And let the car do the driving. I would love that. And I don't think self-driving cars are quite there yet. Some of the conditions I've run into, like, what do you do on a gravel road when there is no, you can't see because you're in whiteout conditions? I don't know if a car can handle that. Well, maybe they can. I don't know. Gravel road, though, I'm kind of thinking not. Although maybe they can use GPS, come to think of it. But anyway, I'm digressing. The point is, this isn't some technology that we're talking about for the future. This is a technology that's here now. What we're doing now is we're seeing the technology be refined. And we're seeing it in trucks, delivery trucks, maybe school buses, personal automobiles. And what that will mean is all of these people who made their money driving trucks, or over on your left you see another one, the train. I think that could come even sooner. All these people driving trucks suddenly aren't needed anymore. Now, that's a little scary. And I'll be honest, it strikes a little bit close to home for me. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but he's dead now. He had cancer due to exposure to Agent Orange during his time in Vietnam. But I had an uncle who was a truck driver. So, yeah, this isn't just 100% abstract to me. He became unemployable as the cancer progressed because the cancer showed up in his brain. And, I don't remember all the technicalities, but that ended his possibility to be an independent truck driver. So, yeah, that's real. And what do we do for all these people who are suddenly unemployed because self-driving trucks have taken over? The oil industry in this state, although it's definitely in a downturn right now, provides a lot of employment. A great many of those jobs are truck drivers. In fact, schools, by the way, here we're crossing the railroad tracks, and you'll see the town of Gascoigne, which I will have to talk about in a future video. There is pieces of the Keystone Pipeline in Gascoigne, which I think I mentioned in another video. But anyway, the oil industry, believe it or not, employs a lot of truck drivers, to the point that school districts in the western end of the state have trouble getting school bus drivers, because everybody who has that kind of license could make a lot more money, and still can make a lot more money working in the oil field than working as a school bus driver. We're dealing with that. I mean, I mentioned in a previous video, we're short an art teacher. We need a school bus driver too, at least one, preferably a few. That's a real problem. But, yeah, that's a problem for us being short right now. But you put in self-driving trucks, all those people employed in the oil field making pretty decent money, actually making, in most cases, more than I do, are suddenly without jobs. Well, now what? What do they do? They're not ready for anything else in most cases. Now, I know one guy who was a teacher. He went into driving truck for a few years. When the oil dropped off, he went back into teaching. Okay. But what about everybody else who doesn't have something to fall back on? Now, some would argue that this is just, there on the left, the white is the Keystone Pipeline. Some would argue that this is just the way things are. The traditional example you always read is buggy whip manufacturers suddenly without a job as cars come along. And we've definitely seen more robots in manufacturing. There was a time when human muscle was important. You could get a job just because you were big and strong, or you were good at repetitive tasks. But even that's changing. Now we have machines that do a lot of those jobs. Even a lot of the agricultural jobs, there's concern about a lot of this, these very poorly paid agricultural workers could be replaced by machines as costs go up. Or fast food workers replaced by machines. Around here, the coal industry is still going fairly well. In fact, Gascoigne, which we just went through, has a bit to do with coal. But on the whole, the coal industry is really struggling in this country. In fact, that's part of what got Donald Trump elected. Because Hillary Clinton had no answers. Neither did Donald Trump, but at least he could sound like he did. And he actually sounded like he cared, which is what worked. But anyway, the coal industry has really, really struggled in this country. Look around West Virginia, those areas. Some really extreme poverty because of changes in the coal industry. And nobody has answers for those people. And it's just going to get bigger. I mean, you're seeing, first of all, money is getting to be more concentrated in the hands of the wealthy. There is a much bigger wage gap and wealth gap. I was reading somewhere recently that, and I wish I'd written the reference down, so this won't be in the bibliography unless I can find it again, but half the world's wealth is concentrated in the hands of 5 people. What if that gets worse? We worry about the erosion of the middle class. Well, if we can't find jobs, that's a much more serious problem. We're seeing self-checkout in grocery stores. Amazon has actually experimented with stores with no checkout. You just load up your cart, walk out the door, and somehow it scans as you walk out and it knows what you took. It being the store. A lot more machines doing the work. And you might be saying, okay, those are pretty rote jobs. Well, this is moving into more technical jobs. There's a lot of jobs with education becoming obsolete. In my state, look at this, farmers, ranchers are becoming obsolete. The farms are getting bigger and bigger. That's why so many schools are closing down around North Dakota. Or struggling to have programs because they just don't have kids because they don't have farmers and ranchers because those have gotten so big. But even more technical jobs. Here's one that I found interesting. Reporters and correspondents. Now, part of that is changes in the news industry. Newspapers have really struggled the last few years. But another piece of it is machines actually writing the articles. That's interesting. Apparently machines can actually write. Will the day come when machines write our TV shows and our movies also? God forbid. Well, I don't know. And previously, employment has changed. People have had to be willing to move, look for new jobs, seek further education. But is the day coming when that's not possible anymore? What do you do with everybody at that point? So it's actually kind of funny, and I didn't time it this way, it just kind of happened, but it's kind of funny. I'm coming up on Reeder, North Dakota here. I know a lady who used to be a teacher in Reeder. The school's been closed longer than I've lived in this area, so it was closed when I moved here. But this is a town that had a school, K through 12 school. She taught in the high school. And now that school is abandoned. They use, I don't know, the gym gets used for a couple things, like a community center or something. I would swear I drove through Reeder. Okay, I didn't drive through Reeder on this trip. I remember now. I drove through Reeder on the next trip. The one where I went to the Governor's Conference on Innovative Education. So I won't pause to take you on a tour of Reeder this time. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Reeder. The school closed. The reason was lack of kids. There are a lot of schools around the state that have had to close for lack of kids. Full K through 12 schools. My own school district, you have seen the rural school that closed for lack of kids. It's a lot of factors go into it. I think one of them is North Dakota has too many towns and has too many schools. But another one is, once these towns were alive and had more people, the agriculture, as farms got bigger, that just moved out, that meant business sections. Oh, we can't support this business anymore. I mean, my town lost its clothing store this year. We also lost our grocery store off of Main Street. What else are we going to lose? So as an industry collapses, it has an effect in other areas as well. Dickinson's been crying about people not shopping locally because it's hurting them all, and I think that's a nationwide problem because of online shopping. And so this is affecting a lot of people. So what happens when people can't find jobs? In the extreme case, civil war. I hope it never comes to that. To a lesser extent, we have mass poverty. Great Depression all over again. What's kind of interesting, I've gotten into a series of books that's also a TV show by two gentlemen. They go by the pen name because they share writing duties. James S.A. Corey. It's a series of novels called The Expanse, collectively. TV shows also called The Expanse. And it takes place in a very overpopulated future where man has made it to the star, or not to the stars, but to the planets. They're around the solar system. But one of the things going on with Earth that's different from out in the belt or on Mars, with so many billions of people, many more billion than we have now, mass unemployment. So these people live on what in the novel is called basic. Now what that means is very basic housing, very basic, it's described as paper clothing, and what in the hell do you do all day? one of the characters who's actually sort of a spy against Asvarala, I can't remember exactly how to pronounce her name. She's in the UN. Anyway, he gets fired because he's a spy, and he's cursed to live on basic for the rest of his life, and that is almost like a fate worse than death to him. And they're not starving, and yet, where's your pride? I mean, what do you live for all day? I get angry about my job sometimes. Sometimes I dream about the day when I'm finally able to retire. But at the same time, a job, being needed somewhere, gives you a reason to get up in the morning, gives you a purpose. And I think that's a fundamental piece of human dignity. And although I couldn't give you a tour of Reader earlier, that's in another video, this is Bucyrus, North Dakota. I guess who that is, taking a picture of the abandoned grain elevator. This town actually, large swath of it, burned down by a wildfire. That is not my dog. Some people were walking him, and I guess he really, really wanted to come see me. But anyway, so I was taking some pictures of it, of the grain elevator. But anyway, yeah, there was a big fire that a lot of the buildings here burned, and so I was curious to see what it looked like now after the fire has been gone for a few years. And maybe I'll put up a link to where you can find the pictures for you. But anyway, Bucyrus is a little town that, of course, along the railroad, because that's how a lot of towns here got started, and it's just sort of faded away over the years till it's almost nothing now. And the fire definitely didn't help. But I guess what that points out, let me grab my notes. What do you do? Bucyrus is going to fade away eventually. A lot of the people living there are older. That's what happens with towns. And as the older people die off, buildings are abandoned, and there's nothing. So I was talking about the expanse and all these people living on basic, which sounds pretty hopeless to me. Well, let's talk current events a little bit. Finland is currently talking about universal income. That's even been a discussion here in the United States. Guaranteeing everybody a basic income. Now, your libertarian-minded folks will say, well, it's not fair. Who's going to pay for it? The more progressive-minded folks would say, well, the wealthy, we've got this very increasing wage gap. Let's deal with that. But the truth is, we do need to do something with all these people. But does a universal income really answer the question? Because like I said, yeah, being able to feed yourself is kind of important. But once your basic needs are met, which is why in the expanse it's called basic, then what? You need other things just for your human dignity. I hope that as a teacher, I'm helping to prepare kids for the future, develop that creative mind, that drive, so that they can find something else. That's why I was excited about the Governor's Summit on creative education. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who are going to get left behind. I often know when a kid graduates, well, you're going to go from blaming the school and the teachers for all your problems to blaming your string of employers for all your problems. And nothing's going to change for you. That's pretty horrible. But it's true. You can see these work attitudes. Now, some of these kids that aren't so good at school the way it's structured, I don't know why I decided to go down this street, but I did. They'll be fine once they're out of school. It's just the way school's structured just doesn't work for them. But then there are others who do not have the attitudes necessary to sustain themselves. And I suppose that comes back to Margaret Christie's comment about that Apple executive who said people who need managing are unemployable. So I would say this. You do need people in charge. But then, I must have been pausing to take a picture here. But then you need to be able to get out of the way, let them work, let them do their thing. Say, this is what we want, and then get out of the way so that they can do it. I think of it as teaching. My principal says, hey, you're not teaching chemistry this year, even though you're taking a whole week out of a whole 3 years out of your life to get better educated to teach it. You're teaching earth science. Okay. But then he needs to get out of the way and let me actually teach it. Now, if he comes in and says, hey, you need to teach it this way. Not so many labs. Here, this is the book. In fact, here's a script. Just read this every day. Oh. No. That's that. And I took that to mean that. You need managers to say, here's your tasks. In the restaurant, in my little video I mentioned the restaurant example. Yeah, you need the boss to say, this is your job, this is what you do. But you don't need the boss to say, okay, there aren't many customers here right now, why don't you go sweep the floor instead of standing there? Oh, why don't you go wipe down the counters? Here, there's dishes in the sink that need washing. But yeah, now I'm back to the current video. But yeah, there are people I worked with back then that, now that's the entrance to Bucyrus, that truly were lost without somebody giving them step by step, now do this, now do this. They really needed to be told what to do, one thing after the other. So I interpreted that Apple executive's comments that way. That, yeah, there's people in charge, and yes, people do need to be trained into the job. You can't expect them to just walk in and be prepared. But they should be able to there's another jump where I cut a bunch of this out. Be given a goal and work towards it without a manager. The manager will stop in and get regular progress reports, but the manager shouldn't be telling them exactly what to do. And there are schools, because I know people that teach in them, where the principal really does micromanage. You need to do this many labs or whatever. So I took it that way, but yes, there is a darker way to take it also. And, as I just said, there is a possibility of a very dark future. So you get all these people, no fault of their own, their work ethic is just fine, but poof, their job is gone. Machine is doing it now. Or their job is just obsolete. They're invested in the community, they've owned a house, it's hard to sell the house because everybody is trying to get out of there. And it's a big financial investment. What do they do? Some people say, well, find another job. They don't have the education for it. Is that their fault? They went out into the world with good intentions of getting a job, and they did get a job, and they did well, until things outside their control left them behind. What do you do for them? I think in this country, we have a tendency to blame them. We say, well, it's your fault. You should have gone to college, which, by the way, is no longer a guarantor of employment. You just need to move. Go somewhere where there are jobs. That's expensive. I've moved a bunch of times, I know. And I don't have a good answer for that. And that's the dystopian part of this future that I didn't talk about in my last video. I wish I did have something to offer. Really don't. I think about it. We're coming into Hettinger, by the way. And so it's a good time for me to close this topic and take you around Hettinger real quick in the exact opposite direction from how I come into it, but whatever. I have visions of a better human future, which maybe I'll talk about in a separate video. But honestly, this is another town that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Worse shape than mine. A lot of abandoned businesses, abandoned houses. Compare Main Street now to what it was 20 years ago. Oh my God. Really, really suffering through no fault of their own. Just changes in industries, changes in the economy, changes in agriculture especially. And what do? What can they do? I don't know. And I think that's one area where government needs to take some leadership. Maybe we need some leaders in there. It's all well and good to say pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But really, what do you do? In my world, I can hopefully give the next generation some skills to cope. But if machines are doing everything, is that even enough? So since this is a dystopian video, maybe my next one needs to be about utopia. But we're basically out of Hettinger now. So I'm going to insert some footage where I drove around Hettinger a few weeks before this. So Hettinger is a bit smaller than my town. It's on more of a hillside than my town. In some ways, maybe a little bit more attractive, honestly. But here, this is me turning the camera. I decided to go by the school. They have an interesting school. It's maybe worse than mine, a school of many additions. And some of them not so good. In fact, honestly, I teach in a far, far better building. When people say that schools collect too much tax money, this is one that definitely does not. These classrooms we're going past right here are god-awful. I'm not exaggerating. I hope they can find a way to have a better building. Something was going on there that night, too. I don't know what, but something. So this newest part down here is the high school. One thing I do like about Hettinger School is they take up less land because they put it on 2 stories. But if you're in a wheelchair with all those additions, my God, good luck. Because, there's a lot of stairs. So then they have to have chair lifts everywhere because they don't really have elevators. And the city pool is actually part of the school, so that's kind of nice. And then we'll drive down Main Street and so on. But what I have been told is Hettinger used to have a very, very good Main Street with a lot of different kinds of businesses on it. It used to be a place people wanted to come to shop, just kind of for fun. It helped. They had the hospital there, and, I hate to be sexist, but considering the time and the place, doctors' wives looking for something to do would start cute little shops there. And not so much anymore. Their main street, just like mine, is drying up. They had a big department store on Main Street, just like my town did. It was actually the same one. It was called Alco. Mine has Alco. My Alco moved out of town off of Main Street, went out of business and became a Shopco. Theirs stayed on Main Street, but went out of business when Alco went out of business. Now there's nothing in there. It's not on this corner. I guess it's the next corner. But anyway, yeah. What a downer ending. This tan building up here on the left is what was an Alco. They do have 2 decent grocery stores and things, but yeah, they have 1 or 2 businesses I wish we had, but on the whole, they're struggling more than we are, and we're struggling. And yeah, and that's a future I see nationwide. And you talk to people from small towns, and that's just a universal thing. I wish I had an answer. Now, so I think, since I was very dystopian in this video, I'll do another video, maybe my next one, because we won't quite be to the interesting part yet. And I'll talk about the utopian side of it. You know, some possible utopian solutions. And hopefully the reality will be somewhere in between, but yeah, I think back to the Great Depression, which I didn't live through, but I think there was a possibility of a civil war then. And if you have a lot of people unemployed, we could come back to that. You know, right now you get your wackadoodles will spout off and talk about civil war. You know, you hear it on the right, you know, about, well, these militias and stuff are all about resisting the government because those doggone Democrats are in charge. And you hear some of it on the left too. And I hate that kind of rhetoric because I don't think we're there yet. I think we are at the point right now where we can still come up with solutions. But I don't know if people want to. That innovative education talk, you know, one of the biggest things we're fighting, not just in education, but just in general, is inertia. It's always been done this way. Why would I change? That attitude. And that attitude could carry you over the edge. So, on that super depressing note, I am about to head into South Dakota, and we'll see you next week, and hopefully I'll leave you on a little bit more optimistic note, and maybe the real world can get us somewhere in between. So, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.